Good afternoon to you. 407 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, recaps the day's events at 4:30 and gives us a preview of what to expect over the next 4 years. She'll be our eyes and ears inside of that White House. Steve Baker will join us from the Blaze at 5:30. He was one of the January 6th hostages. We'll talk to him a little bit more about what he's going through and perhaps talk to him about some breaking news as President Trump is set to make everybody, as he says, very happy with what he does today for the January 6th hostages. And you can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, we are awaiting quite a few signatures from the President of the United States. The news going into this morning is that President Trump is set for over 200 executive actions, including some that we're already seeing come to fruition, closing the border to all illegal aliens, declaring that national emergency at the border, directing designations of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, bringing back Remain in Mexico, ending catch and release, having the military construct new border wall, unleashing Alaskan energy, getting rid of Biden's policies that have constrained the energy supply, returning federal workers to in-person work, strengthening control over senior government officials, implementing new merit-based hiring reviews, suspending security clearances for those 51 Intel officials who lied to the rest of us about Hunter Biden's laptop. That was in the 2020 election. Ending all of the DEI racial prejudice programs inside of the federal government, establishing that new Department of Government Efficiency, declaring a national energy emergency. You heard from the president on that today. Getting rid of all those offshore wind leases, the ones that are killing the whales. Withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord yet again, and direct the agencies and the departments of the federal government to get rid of everything that makes life more expensive for us. I like how this is going. Jackie Heinrich shared a lot of that from the Fox News Channel. Here with more, Kevin Roberts joins us now. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation, host of the Kevin Roberts Show. Kevin, great to talk to you on this wonderful day.
Vince, my friend, it's day one of the American Restoration, and I think most Americans and most people across the world are ecstatic, as they should be.
Yeah, rightfully so. And I'm looking. We're trying to keep track of everything that's changing right now as we change the president of the United States, Kevin Roberts. I mean, we've already seen the CBP-1 app, which was used to traffic human beings into the United States by Joe Biden. That's been shut down. People on that app have received notifications that their appointments are gone. Now we see border control already coming into place. We see some of the pro-abortion websites that the Biden administration put online. Those have been taken down because we shouldn't be telling people to kill their kids. The Trump administration has already taken some of those sites offline. Things are changing rapidly, Kevin Roberts.
Well, and they need to. If you think about it, in the months following the election of 2020, you, I, many conservative types basically were doing mental health counseling for American patriots who thought that maybe the Republic's days were gone. And certainly it took President Trump a little while to get his head of steam during that interregnum, if you will. But about 2 years ago, just before he announced that he was officially running for president again, it was very clear that Donald Trump had a clear set of priorities that started with shutting down the border, restoring the rule of law there and also in our cities, revitalizing the economy, bringing common sense back into the military, across government agencies. In essence, I think he summed all of that up very well today when he said that this is a revolution of common sense. Americans want to wake up in a normal country. And to the point of your question, Vince, if in fact that's your goal, considering how much damage the Biden-Harris regime did, and by the way, it's wonderful to say that in the past tense, you got to get going on day one. And I'm not surprised because I've been talking to a lot of the officials who are now part of the administration that they're moving so quickly.
How much do you think having us all live through the Biden administration opened the eyes of the American people to why the Trump administration is preferable?
It was vital. I hate that we had to go through it, but I liken it to neighbors that my family had when we were back in Texas during the COVID shutdowns. Even there, I mean, they were too bad for too long, where they finally had their eyes open to the ridiculous false promises that their local schools were making. What happened with the Biden-Harris policies was that we had that kind of awakening, however rude that it was, to policies across the board. Without that, I don't think you would have this mandate. I don't think you'd have this popular vote victory that Trump had. And for that matter, I don't think you would have this very serious, mature resolve that was personified in President Trump's inaugural address today.
I liked his inaugural address. I thought it contained a lot of optimism, a lot of belief in the greatness of America. He has big visions for. Well, he wants to even change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. He talked about retaking control of the Panama Canal. He wasn't shy about his love for the country. What did you think of today's address? How did it work for you?
I think it's one of the best in history, and I really do mean that from the standpoint of policy substance, and also having taught a lot of American history classes and examined a lot of presidential inaugural addresses. It was really well written, and I thought for Trump it was well delivered. He did not go off script. It was something where he really wanted to stick to the substance of the matter. He did a good job of that. What was striking to me is what was striking to you, which is he didn't do the typical BS of extending an olive branch to people who wanted to see him put in jail for the rest of his life. He articulated an agenda, not just because it's that of his own thinking and his own advisors, but because this is the American people want. And I think he deserves an A+ for the address. People who watched that across the country, but also I'm hearing from friends across the world, are saying America is back. And I think you're going to see huge successes early on in the Trump administration because of that game plan that he outlined today.
Everything is unusual about this guy, and in a good way, I think. He had in attendance today in a very small crowd, 600 people inside of that Capitol Rotunda. You had a lot of the nation's tech leaders all sort of dutifully lined up now, many of whom had been working against the president and the American people for years. My view is that they've been brought to heel, not that somehow President Trump is a sellout for having them. What do you make of their presence there today?
Oh, I agree entirely. You know, the last couple of nights we've gone to some of the official events, and it's remarkable that the crowd in some of those events is a lot more corporate. Now, for those of us at Heritage, we're much more comfortable with the folks here at our building, you know, the 3,800 American patriots, everyday folks who are here. But hats off to President Trump for bringing the corporate types to those events and bringing them to heel. They were there in an attempt to curry favor, but in a lot of ways to sort of extend a soft apology. Some of those corporate leaders were very explicit about how, quote unquote, dangerous Trump would be to the American Republic. It's great to see that Trump has this persuasiveness, not just with his own base, not just with the political center in this country, but frankly with the elites that you often on your show, and I often in the speaking engagements I do, rail against. Time will tell about how long that political marriage can last, but at least for the short term, I'm very optimistic.
You know, there were some world leaders also present today, which is also an unusual feature at an inauguration. Javier Milei of Argentina seen in the crowd. What did you make of these world leaders who decided to come for this?
Well, I think it says two things. Number one, that America remains the world's leader, not as it relates to military strength, although that's true. The point is that's not the greatest criteria, but in terms of moral clarity. That what I hear from world leaders and diplomats here in D.C. of many countries is that over the last 4 years, there hasn't been any clarity about America's strategic direction, let alone the moral clarity, for example, on boys being boys and girls being girls.
Yes.
But the second thing is, and I really do mean this maybe more as a historian, Vince, than as a public policy guy, I was sitting there thinking, Trump is important not just as a president and as a leader of American conservatism right now. He may go down in history as one of the most important pivotal figures in modern history because he is going to almost single-handedly save the West by bringing back common sense.
Yeah, and he's an inspiration to democratic movements all over the planet who would like to see sovereignty restored to their countries, people who believe in their national identities and would like to defend those. There's a reason Giorgia Meloni is in attendance today of Italy, and Javier Milei of Argentina. It's because in Trump they see inspiration.
Oh, completely. In fact, I think about a group of European leaders we hosted here at Heritage in the last few days. Some of them were at the ceremony, and all of them were at the various inaugural events. They were led by Santiago Abascal, a good friend of mine who is the head of the Vox party in Spain. It's the real conservative party, not the Rhino party there. And Santiago has formed this new political party in the European Parliament that is ascendant, and it's very Trumpian. And they see Trump as someone who they can count on to help them out, but very importantly, as an icon of their movement that, in other words, regardless of whatever the elites throw at these respective leaders from Spain and Estonia and other countries across the European continent, that if Trump could survive that, then of course they can as well and perhaps flourish and maybe one day render the European Union obsolete.
You were talking about the president, did not extend an olive branch to the administration that has spent all these years attacking him and his supporters, throwing them in jail in many cases, the Biden administration. Biden, in some of his final acts as president of the United States today, issued a number of pardons that facilitated what I consider to be the greatest cover-up in presidential history. He gave a pardon to Anthony Fauci. He gave a pardon to Mark Milley. He gave pardons flatly to people who participated in the January 6th committee that Nancy Pelosi had assembled. He also issued pardons for 5 more of his family members, 11-year blanket pardons for any federal crimes that they may have committed over the last 11 years. When you see Joe Biden do that today, what do you think, Kevin Roberts? Is Kevin still with us? Is he? He's still on the line, but Kevin, hold tight. We're not hearing you. Let's see if we can't get you back up. There we go. Hey, Kevin, what do you think when you see Joe Biden do that today?
I didn't think it was possible for him to tarnish his legacy anymore. I really do think he's one of the worst presidents in history with Carter and Harding, but he did. And it really shows that those of us who for 4 years have been saying, not only is this guy wrongheaded about policy, but that he's even worse than simply being self-interested. He's actually corrupt. And, you know this well, Vince, we were vilified for saying that. You yourself, too. It's true. And the fact that he would be such a coward as to make those blanket preemptive pardons to the extent that's even possible 20 minutes before leaving office says everything about his presidency. But if there is a silver lining, it is to underscore what the American people said on November 5th, which is that they're tired of the elites establishing one set of rules for themselves, but requiring the rest of us to follow a different set of rules. That's got to be our motivation as we try to implement Trump's agenda.
Also, finally, don't you think, I kind of think we need to test the constitutional limits of these blanket pardons, because I'm pretty sure the founders were not envisioning 11-year blanket pardons for any crimes you may have committed. I realize that there have been a couple of historical examples where, pardons, for instance, for former Confederate soldiers. There were pardons for draft dodgers in Vietnam, and then there was the pardon of Richard Nixon by Gerald Ford. But even all of those pardons were much more constrained than what we just saw Joe Biden do. Don't you think that maybe it's time that the court take a closer look at this?
Oh, completely. I guarantee you that at Heritage, we're already doing that. We started doing that 5 minutes after they were announced. I know Chip Roy and other great members of Congress are already talking about that. We must do that because think about 5, 10, 25 years down the road, if this is allowed to stand, the kind of damage that can be done, not just in terms of sort of a simple level of injustice, but completely eroding our belief in the rule of law, is going to be extremely damaging. And therefore, among all of the other things we're talking about, being on offense about public policy, we also simultaneously as a movement have to test the limits of this.
Yeah, for sure. I'd just like to get some clear answers. Always turn to you for some clear answers. Thank you, Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation. Great to talk to you today, sir. All right, the issue of these pardons that Biden handed out today to everyone who committed crimes came up on NBC. NBC was trying to frame this from the perspective of, what if the January 6th people get pardoned? And former Speaker Kevin McCarthy turned the tables on the NBC panel.
One of the things he just mentioned, and he's alluded to it 1,000 times, and it seems intent to do it, which is pardoning some of those who have been convicted in connection with January 6th. You were there on January 6th. You were quite disappointed in the president's actions that day. What do you think if he pardons some of these people?
The president has the power to do that. This is the difference.
No question about it. But
okay,
what do you think?
But this president told the American public why he was campaigning for office. If I am elected president, I will pardon these people.
Now, what do you think?
But compare this to Joe Biden, who said he would never pardon his son, who now, on the very last day, in the last 30 minutes, pardons his entire family.
What do you make of that decision for him to make those pardons and to do it now?
Terrible, terrible. Think about what everybody else had gone through. Why pardon your family? What, it makes no sense to me. Why pardon January 6th from the idea of the elected officials? All it does is put a cloud over that you did something wrong.
Liz Cheney.
These people didn't ask for it, but you must know something that other people do not. And why do you wait to 30 minutes before? Why did you tell the American public you would never pardon your son, and you do it? Now, the difference here is whether you agree or disagree about what President Trump's going to do.
He ran on it.
He told the American public ahead of time. They put that into consideration
and
whether they vote
for
him for president. So he's just keeping a campaign promise.
Well, Kevin McCarthy is about as right as you can get on the subject. Yes, that's true. The American people voted for him, knowing that was a part of the deal. That's what they wanted. That's what they desired. Because they see the corruption here and they say, enough. Enough. Free these people. Coming up, Reagan Reese. She's a White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. She's had a front row seat to history today, watching all of it. And then she'll tell us what we might expect over these next 4 years as she starts attending those briefings in the new Trump administration. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, 5:30, Steve Baker is here, an investigative reporter at The Blaze. And importantly, one of the people on the receiving end of all of that January 6th persecution by the Biden administration. We'll get his reaction to the rearrival of President Trump now as the 47th president and the expectation of some January 6th pardons to go out to what President Trump calls the January 6 hostages today. That could be ahead as the president is expected to sign a bunch of executive orders, executive actions at Capital One Arena, at least some of them, alongside a huge crowd of adoring supporters. Some 20,000 people packed in right now, awaiting the president's arrival. We're covering it all. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The reaction inside of that Capital One Arena as President Trump took the oath of office today.
United States. So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
Doing the cheering inside that so many of us were doing the cheering outside today during that great inaugural address. For more on this subject, I want to go to Reagan Reese now. She's the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. In fact, she's been outside of Capital One Arena today talking to so many of the people who are here in town to see the inauguration, to be a part of this moment. Reagan, great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
What has it been like out on the street today? It's been cold. Obviously, that's the reason President Trump has given for why they moved the inaugural events indoors. What are people saying as they have decided to come to the nation's capital to celebrate?
It really is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Right where we're located, our office is a couple blocks from the White House, pretty much a ghost town because you can't get anywhere. All the streets are blocked off. But if you just go one Metro stop over to Metro Center, the streets are packed with Trump supporters who are not deterred by the fact that the inauguration was going to be moved indoors, that they probably weren't going to get one of those 20,000 seats within Capital One Arena. And, you know, people are packed into bars and coffee shops. And as I was walking down the streets today, I saw Trump supporters quite literally lined up outside of bars with their faces pressed up against the windows just to watch the screen where Trump was being sworn in. And at 12:02, right as he took the oath of office, the streets erupted in these cheers and excitement that he was now the president. But in terms of what people are saying, they're just so grateful to be here and largely aren't buying the fact that the inauguration was moved inside for weather. Every single person I spoke to, more than a dozen of Trump supporters, really believe that the inauguration was moved inside because of security concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, Susan Crabtree over at Rickler Politics has done some great reporting on this subject, and saying that, look, government officials have been mostly sticking with the weather story for the explanation for why things were moved. But even if there was a small security concern, obviously it would be a source of great relief to the people who are tasked with protecting the president of the United States and everybody who's around him, that they can have a more secure environment to protect him, which is what took place today. I do know that a lot of, I mean, this is perhaps unique to Trump supporters, but a lot of Trump supporters, they're rugged people. So, we even heard some audio on Friday of people who were in the streets going, well, wait a second, I take care of cows every day. It's not like that stops just because it gets cold outside. So there are quite a few people who said, yeah, I was here to endure the cold and I would have been fine with it, right?
Yes, definitely. I think that these people are so dedicated to President Trump, and that's a lot of what's shown through my conversations today. People coming from LA and Florida and New York and Chicago, and I even spoke to a Canadian today who came down to see President Trump be sworn in, simply because, yeah, they're so dedicated, they're ready to brave the cold, and they really just want a glimpse of history, to just be in the streets. I think the odds that a lot of these people are going to actually get to see Trump in person is rather low. I won't see Trump today in person. It's really just remarkable, I think, to see the loyalty and support for President Trump, even in this 20-degree weather.
We've seen some images of protesters today. It doesn't look like many. I've seen some images pouring in of the group We Fight Back DC and some basically resistance groups. So what are you hearing, if anything, about people who are here to protest President Trump today?
Well, I'll say about this is Semaphore did a piece asking a bunch of people what they got wrong about 2024 or 2025. I think what I got wrong was how much outrage and protest and riots I expected there to be in the event of a Trump victory. And it's been, rather quiet. I've been talking to some of our video guys who went down into the streets to go to a couple protests to try to see what was going on, and really said that it seems like the cold had deterred a lot of those. When I was walking around Capitol One, I didn't see a protester at all. And so, yeah, I really just seems to be rather lackluster from what I've seen. And I think that's a sign of what happened in the election. The tide is turning. Yeah,
a bit of a whimper from the left today, as it looks like President Trump's supporters mostly dominate the streets of Washington, D.C., take up all the restaurant reservations, crowd all the bars, watch all the television screens, and enjoy the re-arrival of President Trump. And now, of course, the work begins. President Trump today, I know you've been focused on some of the specifics, Reagan Reese, is set to sign some 200-plus executive actions, including, we believe, on stage at Capital One Arena coming up. What do we know about these?
I know that I'm going to be up all night trying to sort these through. What we do know is that I think the border is going to be a big one. Incoming White House official said today that there are going to be about 11 executive orders on the border, some of which relate to deploying U.S. troops amongst the border under NORTHCOM. I know immediate termination of Biden's mass parole programs, various other border executive orders. I know that the economy is going to be another one. I'm kind of sifting through some information right now that we've gotten from on background from a White House official. But yeah, we do know that this was confirmed this morning that President Trump is planning on signing some of those executive orders during this Capital One Arena, surrounded by his fans. There is a desk with a microphone set up, which I think is so awesome. But unfortunately, I think we're going to be waiting a little bit for that because they seem to be a bit behind schedule. I know the president was attending a lunch that was supposed to end at 2:15, and as of 3:50, it was still going on. So might be a bit delayed in seeing what I really think is going to be the most entertaining part of today.
Also, one of the executive orders that's being reported that President Trump is likely to sign is one ending birthright citizenship claims in the United States of America. Birthright citizenship is the product of a misreading of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was designed to ensure citizenship for people who were previously slaves. Over American history, of course, it has been reinterpreted, distorted as to meaning anybody who's literally born within the borders of the United States. If you're a Chinese tourist to the United States and you give birth while you're here, your kid becomes a U.S. citizen under this really expansive reading of the 14th Amendment. So President Trump, one of the executive orders that he's set to put in place is to say, no, that's not what the 14th Amendment means. I imagine, Reagan, this is going to be met with a lot of wailing by the left today.
Yeah, I saw a headline this morning from Washington Post, and I'm blanking on which executive order it was about, which reported executive order, but it honestly probably could have been this one. And it was like, Trump set to sign whatever executive order. Here's why experts say that's illegal. Here's why experts say that's wrong.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's already starting, and that's exactly what I expect to come out of the Washington Post, out of CNN, out of the New York Times, is this crying about why all this is wrong. And I think this is going to be a great opportunity for the Daily Caller, having a seat in the White House briefing room, to kind of counter that narrative.
Yes.
And really take it to those media outlets right in their face, right in the same room as them, because I don't think they've really had to face that much in the last 4 years, and I think that could help kind of change the conversation.
How do you expect the interaction between, yourself first and foremost, but also the rest of the press and the President of the United States now with this new administration? Because in the last one, in the Biden administration, Joe Biden was almost never available to anybody. He was mostly kept in hiding. He was brought out for the occasional public event, only on days when he was in good spirits, apparently. According to all of the latest reporting on the effort they undertook to hide his condition. And then Karine Jean-Pierre was about as useless as a press secretary as anybody has ever devised. And in fact, we heard from the New York Post last week that during this critical period where we were getting information about hostage releases for Israel, she was holding an event that was designed to celebrate herself and giving no meaningful information. How do you think things change now going into the Trump administration?
Yeah, one thing I've heard consistently from my colleagues in the White House press corps that have covered both Trump and Biden, I've only covered President Biden, was that President Trump is far more accessible and that there are less press briefings because President Trump will speak for himself and he doesn't need anybody else to speak for himself. And even more so, I've heard from my colleagues that there's hardly ever a day where President Trump is not seen. It was very common to be on White House pool duty and not hear from President Biden, not see President Biden at all. Another thing that I've heard, which I think is a real advantage to the press and speaks to kind of the Trump administration and their willingness to engage, is that White House officials will commonly walk what we call Pebble Beach at the White House. And that's all those green tents and where the news and TV anchors will kind of do their hits from the White House. You can see the White House in the background. I've heard that officials will walk up and down Pebble Beach and are willing to answer questions, and you can pull them aside and talk to them. And when this was being explained to me by one of my colleagues, they posed it this way and said, when was the last time you saw a cabinet official at the White House? And I was like, I don't know. I think it was Pete Buttigieg when the Maryland Bridge collapsed.
Yeah.
And he said that was, it's unheard of in the Trump administration to go months or weeks without seeing a cabinet official around the White House where you can hopefully grab them for a question.
And all of those guys are battle tested. All of the people that President Trump has tapped to be cabinet officials, secretaries in his administration, they're people who are used to question and answer from the press. They've done a lot of media. They know how to defend these positions. They're forceful advocates for them, whether it's RFK or Tom Homan or Pete Hegseth. It's an endless list of people who know how to speak to the media, know how to share the president's message in a consistent way. And I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air just in terms of transparency.
Yeah, I totally. It's nice to have. I'm excited to engage with people. I'm excited to see more faces around the White House. I have heard rumors that we've heard that the White House briefing room might be rearranged. The rumors I've heard right now is that the White House briefing room is going to stay as is, and those major media outlets won't be shifted around. But regardless, I do think that Caroline Leavitt will be calling on those outlets in the back of the room that Karine was always so afraid to go to, because same thing for her. She's battle tested. She likes to spar with the media, and she's not afraid, I think, of taking questions from people who disagree with her or might challenge her from, there's going to be backlash from the right.
Yeah.
There are going to be times that the caller is going to have to ask her about that. And I think she's willing to take those questions head on.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe people like Reagan Reese and James Rosen will get questions again. Stephen Nelson, you know what I mean? I'm really looking forward to that because the country's better with people like you asking those questions. Hey, Reagan Reese, again, White House correspondent at the Daily Caller. Thank you for your time today, and I'm really looking forward to these next few years. I have a feeling we'll be speaking a lot as you get these questions in to a White House that'll actually take them. Thank you, Reagan.
Thanks, Vince.
Always good to talk to Reagan Reese, the great Reagan Reese, which, by the way, I talk to her like every day because I'm also an editor at the Daily Caller, in addition to my work here at WMAL. So Reagan's often we're often working together on, hey, what might be good to ask the White House? That's always fun. It's 4:50 now. All right, the President of the United States set to speak soon at Capital One Arena to a crowd of some 20,000 supporters who braved the cold, lined up in the very early morning hours, and got their first-come, first-serve seats inside of this indoor arena. The president clearly wanting to speak to them on Inauguration Day, and that's going to be the vehicle by which he does that. So looking forward to that. A lot of executive actions expected there. Let's get to Paul, who's calling in from Baltimore on line 2. Paul, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show. Hey, Paul.
Hey. Hello?
Hey, Paul, you hear us okay?
Yep.
Go for it.
Go. Vince?
Yeah, you're on the air, and this is Vince.
Yeah, Vince, you said earlier today that what Trump represents is inspiration. And I tell you, and forgive me if I'm broken up, because even as we speak, I'm crying a little bit. Before he actually took the oath, I cried, and afterwards I cried some more. November the 5th, 2024 is history now. What we have to do is we have to concentrate on the midterms, and we have to concentrate on November 2028. It is our objective, and we must start now.
100%. And getting this agenda underway as quickly as humanly possible. The president set to sign a bunch of executive actions to that effect today. Paul, I know where those tears came from. You feel a lot of emotion watching all of this, worried about the state of your country, and relieved that you've been granted at least this reprieve, which looks pretty good to most of us. We'll see what these next 4 years hold. The president holding a lot of hopes and dreams in his hands. We'll see how he uses them coming up. And we'll be joined by Steve Baker. He's one of those January 6th hostages you've been hearing about. He joins us in this next hour as we're expecting the president to possibly take some big executive actions imminently that affect his life. All ahead.